Do you know who you're talking to, old man? I know exactly who I'm talking to, he said. Calm, unflinching, impossible to intimidate. The drizzle hung low over Westbourne Grove, smearing the outlines of buildings and muting the city's pulse. Morning traffic rolled softly, the air scented with rain and exhaust. Hello, my beautiful people. Before we go further, tell me in the comments section where you are watching from. I will love you to hit the subscribe button so as to get to see more thrilling videos like this one. Now let's dive in. Dr. Grayson Jared walked at his usual pace, a folded newspaper tucked neatly beneath his arm, his gaze fixed on the little cafe at the corner that sold the day's first pot of tea. His coat collar was turned up against the chill, his movements steady, measured, dignified. A shout broke the rhythm of the street. Hey! You there, stop! He turned. A young police officer, uniform sharp, hair slicked back, the badge gleaming, advanced toward him. Her boots struck the wet pavement with deliberate precision. She had the presence of someone used to being obeyed. Identification, she snapped. Grayson blinked once. Is there a problem, officer? Just show me your ID. Her tone wasn't a request. It was the kind of command meant to press obedience out of fear. I don't carry it for morning walks, he replied evenly. I live 2 streets down. She stepped closer, squinting at him as if studying a threat. You fit the description of a suspect. Male, dark-skinned, mid-60s, seen near here earlier this morning. He almost smiled. You've just described every man over 50 in this neighborhood. A few passers-by slowed. One lifted a phone, pretending to check messages but recording. Another whispered, "What's going on?" The drizzle kept falling, faint and cold, as tension thickened between them. Hands where I can see them, she ordered. My hands. Grayson raised them slightly, his newspaper still between his fingers. I'm holding the Times, officer. Is that contraband today? Don't get smart with me. Her voice cracked with irritation. You people think you can talk back, she caught herself, jaw tightening, but the words had already slipped out. Grayson's eyes softened, not with fear but with the weary recognition of someone who had lived long enough to hear every variation of that phrase. You people, he repeated quietly. It's been a while since I heard that one. Enough, she barked. Turn around and place your hands on the wall. He didn't move. Am I under arrest? You're being detained for questioning. On what grounds? Suspicious behavior. Suspicious, he echoed. Walking to buy tea. Her hand went to her belt, hovering over her baton. I said turn around. Phones were out now. A small crowd gathered, 3, then 5, then 10 people, rain pooling in the cracks of the pavement as the confrontation unfolded like a slow-motion tragedy. Grayson sighed softly, shifting the newspaper beneath his arm. Corporal, he said, reading the insignia on her shoulder. I'm not resisting, but I think you're making a mistake. Do you know who you're talking to, old man? I know exactly who I'm talking to, he replied. His tone wasn't angry. It was level, deliberate, almost gentle, the voice of a man who'd spent a lifetime measuring words. Do you? For a moment, the street went silent except for the rain. She raised her hand as if to shove him back, the gesture half reflex, half rage. He didn't flinch. Smile for the camera, Corporal. Her eyes darted toward the bystanders filming. The power dynamic shifted in an instant, authority trembling under the weight of an audience. She hesitated, but the damage was already done. Grayson lowered his hands slowly. There's no need for hostility, he said. You're better than this. Back up, she shouted, but the words faltered. The faces watching her had changed, no longer citizens obeying, but witnesses judging. The moment stretched. Her hand hung frozen in midair. He took a single step forward, calm as still water. You should probably call this in, he said softly. It's about to get complicated. He turned and walked away toward the corner cafe. The crowd parted for him without a word. Behind him, the officer stood motionless, anger bleeding into confusion. By the time she regained her voice, he was gone. That afternoon, the video appeared online. A clip, no longer than 40 seconds, the officer's hand raised, the old man's calm face, his single line, "Smile for the camera." The caption beneath read, "When dignity stared down power." Within hours, it was everywhere. News feeds, talk shows, hashtags. The city that had once ignored stories like this couldn't look away now. And by nightfall, someone dug deeper. The man in the video wasn't just a passerby. He was Dr. Grayson Jared, a retired physicist, Oxford alumnus, and father of Marcus Jared, who died 8 years ago in police custody. The same department that employed Corporal Gladwin Linda. The same case that was quietly buried and forgotten. The past had just walked straight into the present, and the city was watching. The footage looped endlessly, but for Grayson, it wasn't the views that mattered. It was the silence that followed, the space between the outrage and the truth. Because this time, he wasn't going to fight them in court. He was going to expose them in daylight. As the night deepened and notifications lit his phone, Grayson sat alone by the window, watching rain gather on the glass. He wasn't angry. He was ready. Subscribe if you believe calm is stronger than violence. The rain didn't stop that night. It came down harder, washing the city in silver streaks, as if the sky itself couldn't decide whether to cleanse or condemn. Inside his modest townhouse, Grayson Jared sat by the window, his teacup untouched, the glow of his phone illuminating the edges of his face. Every few seconds, it buzzed again. Mentions. Tags. Headlines. Old man stands his ground. Officer loses it on unarmed citizen. Smile for the camera. The moment London stopped and watched. The video had exploded. Millions of views in less than 12 hours. Talk shows dissected it. Hashtags rose like storms. Hashtag smile for the camera. Hashtag calm is power. Hashtag Westbourne Groveshame. He had seen this kind of storm before. Not in the streets, but in people's minds. The outrage would burn hot, bright, and brief. Still, something told him this time was different. Because this time, he was in it. He placed the phone face down and exhaled. The rain blurred the streetlight's reflection on the wet pavement outside, reminding him of another night, 8 years earlier. The same rain. The same city. But that time, there had been no cameras. At the Metropolitan Police Department, chaos brewed like a thunderclap. Corporal Gladwin Linda sat stiffly at her desk, jaw tight, scrolling through news feeds filled with her own face. Frozen mid-yell, mid-gesture. Every angle showed her towering over the old man. Every comment section was a tribunal. Disgrace in uniform. Power drunk. This man is a national treasure. She slammed her phone shut, shaking. The door to her superior's office swung open. Linda. Inside. Captain Reese Barrow, a grizzled veteran with a receding hairline and a perpetual scowl, gestured her in. She stepped forward reluctantly. "What the hell were you thinking?" Barrow barked. "You've turned this station into a circus." He was resisting, she said quickly. Wouldn't cooperate. Matched the description of. "I've read your report. It's garbage." Her cheeks flushed. "Sir, he was provoking me. These people think." Barrow's glare cut her off. "Careful with that tone. You're not helping yourself." He threw a printed photo across the table, a still from the video. "That look on your face. That's not enforcement. That's ego." She clenched her fists. "Are we really going to let social media dictate law enforcement?" He sighed, sitting back. "Law enforcement? Or public humiliation? You're suspended until further notice. PR's working on a statement. Don't say a word to the press." Her lips parted in disbelief. "You're throwing me under the bus?" Linda, The whole world saw you lose control. There's no bus big enough to hide under. She turned sharply, storming out. But even as she walked through the hallway, she felt the eyes, colleagues watching, whispering. In the reflection of the polished floor, she barely recognized herself. By dawn, Grayson's image had already become a meme, his calm expression beside the caption, "Grace under fire." Even his quiet words, "Smile for the camera," had been printed on t-shirts. He hadn't slept. His phone rang again. Unknown number. "Dr. Jared," a voice said. "This is Melissa Crane from the Standard. We'd like a statement about the video circulating." "I have nothing to say. Sir, the public." "I said nothing." He hung up, then leaned back in his chair, eyes closed. He knew how quickly media appetites shifted, from fascination to fatigue. But as he scrolled through the headlines again, something caught him off guard. Sources confirm, man in viral video is Dr. Grayson Jared, former physicist at Imperial College and father of Marcus Jared, the man who died in police custody in 2017. He froze. His throat tightened. He hadn't heard his son's name in years, not spoken aloud in public since the inquiry. He clicked the link. There it was. A photo of Marcus, smiling, head tilted, 22 years old, eyes bright and curious. The caption beneath, 8 years later, justice echoes through generations. Grayson set the phone down, trembling. He whispered into the dim room, "You're still here, son." Flashback. Marcus Jared had been studying mechanical engineering, bright as sunlight, with a laugh that could fill a room. He loved tinkering, anything with gears, wires, or noise. One evening, he stopped by the shop after class to pick up groceries. He never came home. The call came just past midnight. Your son was detained for resisting arrest. By dawn, he was gone. The official report claimed suicide in the holding cell. But the bruises, the broken rib, the split lip, the discoloration on his wrists, said otherwise. The officers were cleared of wrongdoing. The file was closed. And Grayson's world, once full of formulas, lectures, and laughter, went silent. The sound of an alert brought him back to the present. Another headline. Officer suspended as viral video sparks protest. Below, a photo of people gathering near Westbourne Grove, holding signs, "Justice has no age," and the silence. "Smile for the camera." Grayson watched in disbelief. He hadn't planned any of this. He hadn't even spoken publicly. Yet somehow, his stillness had become a statement louder than shouting ever could. He received a text from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but thank you. My brother was beaten by the same department last year. Your courage means more than you think." He didn't reply. He simply read it again and again, each word heavier than the last. At a press conference the next morning, Gladwin Linda faced a sea of cameras. Her lawyer stood beside her, reading from a pre-written statement. "The officer regrets that the incident was misinterpreted and that emotions ran high," the lawyer said. However, Corporal Linda maintains she acted in accordance with departmental procedure and protocol. Flashbulbs. Murmurs. When a journalist shouted, "Do you plan to apologize to Dr. Jared?" she stiffened. "I followed protocol," she repeated, voice brittle. Online, the clip was dissected within minutes. No remorse. Protocol isn't humanity. Power protecting power. At the cafe on the corner, Grayson sat quietly by the window, his tea growing cold. The owner, a kind woman named Aisha, placed a pastry beside him. "It's on the house today," she said softly. "You've given people hope." He smiled faintly. "Hope is fragile. Let's see if it survives the morning." Outside, a young reporter approached the glass, camera crew trailing behind. Grayson sighed and stood, stepping outside before they could crowd him. "Dr. Jared," the reporter said breathlessly, "the entire nation's talking about you. People are calling you a symbol of dignity. How do you feel about that?" He looked past the microphone, past the lens. Symbols are dangerous things, he said. People forget the pain behind them. Do you believe this will change anything? He thought for a long moment before answering. Maybe not the world, he said, but perhaps the mirror we hold up to it. By midday, the department's PR team was drowning. Online sleuths dug into public records, linking Corporal Gladwin Linda to multiple prior complaints, all dismissed by her superior, Sergeant Hale. Forums buzzed with screenshots of leaked memos. One line stood out: "Keep internal matters internal. Public confidence depends on silence." Silence. Always silence. Grayson read the words late that night, hands trembling, and felt something inside him begin to turn. The grief that had once hollowed him out now sharpened into purpose. He opened his old laptop, the one he hadn't touched since Lillian's funeral, and began typing. Not an essay, not a complaint. A study. The physics of pressure and power. He started with the footage of the confrontation, frame by frame. He calculated her movement speed, the momentum of her hand, the stillness of his body. He wrote formulas describing impact potential, reflex thresholds, the tension between force and restraint. But beneath the equations, the essay was about something deeper: the science of control, the mechanics of prejudice, the mathematics of moral failure. Elsewhere, Gladwin scrolled through comments until her vision blurred. Every word felt like a blow. Then she saw one message that froze her blood. "You sound just like Hale used to." She slammed her laptop shut. The name haunted her. Sergeant Hale, her mentor, her defender, had taught her everything. How to command, how to intimidate, how to win. But he'd also been the one who said, "Don't ever back down to them." Her phone buzzed. A voicemail from Hale. "Keep your mouth shut," his voice growled. "They'll forget soon enough. They always do." But she could hear something new in his tone. Fear. By the third day, the video had crossed 20 million views. Politicians tweeted statements. Activists called for policy reform. Schools invited Grayson to speak. He declined them all. Instead, he uploaded his study anonymously under a pseudonym, GJ_reflex theory. He attached the video and titled it, "What Power Looks Like When It's Afraid." Within hours, the post spread like wildfire. Scientists praised its insight. Activists praised its calm defiance. Even journalists called it a masterclass in intellectual resistance. Grayson didn't read the comments. He simply watched the view count climb and thought of Marcus. "Maybe this is what you wanted me to do, son. Not shout." Show. Later that evening, as he prepared to turn in, his phone lit up again. An unknown number. "Dr. Jared?" "Yes." A pause. "You don't know me, but I worked at the precinct back then. The night your son was brought in." Grayson's breath caught. "I can't say much over the phone," the voice continued, trembling. "But what happened that night? It wasn't suicide." Then the line went dead. He sat in silence, heart pounding, staring at the rain tracing paths down the windowpane. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the city, as if the sky itself had something left to confess. The night was quiet except for the rain tapping against the windows. Grayson sat alone in his study, the small desk light casting a cone of gold across a field of old papers. The scent of dust and forgotten ink hung heavy in the air. Before him lay the fragments of a life he had spent years trying not to remember. Case files, photographs, and handwritten notes, all bundled in aging envelopes. He pulled one closer, the folder labeled Jared versus Metropolitan Police, 2017. The edges were curled, the paper thin as onion skin. He hadn't opened it since the day the case was closed. His hands hesitated for a moment before breaking the seal. Inside were photographs. His son Marcus, in a suit, beaming beside his mother, Lillian. Another photo, faded, of Marcus holding up his engineering project. A miniature wind turbine, blades made from recycled plastic, his grin full of promise. Grayson's breath caught. It had been 8 years, yet the pain hadn't dulled, It had only learned to sit quietly, waiting for nights like this. He flipped the photo over. In his wife's handwriting, delicate and looping, were 3 words, "For our future." He pressed the photo to his chest and closed his eyes. It had started with a phone call, one that still echoed in his dreams. "Your son's been detained, Dr. Jared." He resisted arrest. Those words had turned his world into static. Marcus was the gentlest soul he knew. Bright, polite, stubborn only about justice. Resisting, Grayson had repeated, disbelief thick in his voice. By the time he reached the precinct, Marcus was gone. They called it suicide in custody. No witnesses, no footage. The official statement spoke of remorse, guilt, instability. But when Grayson saw the body, there was no doubt. His son had fought for air, not for forgiveness. The coroner's report had been scrubbed clean. The officers involved, protected. And at the top of every signed page, one name appeared: Sergeant Raymond Hale. He remembered the man clearly: broad shoulders, confident smirk, a voice that reeked of authority. When Grayson demanded answers, Hale had said, "Sometimes these things happen. Your boy made poor choices." Poor choices. The phrase still burned like acid. Grayson had gone to the media. He'd written letters, filed appeals, begged for an inquiry. Doors closed. Calls went unanswered. The department buried the case, and with it, any trace of justice. Then came the slow unraveling. Lillian, once strong and steady, began to fade. At first, it was the sleepless nights, the trembling hands, the way her laughter vanished from the house. She stopped playing the piano, stopped answering the phone. Every time she looked at the front door, she expected Marcus to walk through it. "One evening," she said quietly, "he called out for you, you know. Before they took him." Grayson hadn't known how to respond. He just took her hand, and she wept against his shoulder. Months passed. Then years. The court dismissed their final appeal. "Lack of new evidence," the judge had said, eyes lowered as if ashamed. That night, Lillian stopped eating. Within 6 months, she was gone. Grayson had stood at her grave, rain pouring down, whispering the same words he'd once told Marcus before every exam. "Do your best, son. Always your best." Now, sitting in his study, he looked around the room and saw ghosts. Lillian's scarf still hung by the window. Marcus's wind turbine sat on the shelf, unmoving, its blades coated in dust. He rubbed his temples, exhaustion heavy behind his eyes. The confrontation with the young officer, Gladwin, had cracked something open he thought was sealed. Her face, her tone, the way she spoke down to him. It had all been familiar. The arrogance, the certainty, the training. Sergeant Hale's shadow was still walking the streets, wearing a new badge through her. He turned toward the window. The city lights blurred like smeared stars. Somewhere out there, justice was still buried under paperwork and excuses. But for the first time in years, he felt something stir beneath his grief, a quiet certainty. He whispered into the dark, "You sent her to me, didn't you, Marcus? To remind me that silence isn't peace." The thought lingered, strange and steady. He stood, gathering the files into a neat stack. His movements were slow, deliberate. He wasn't shaking anymore. He was remembering. For 8 years, he had lived like a man waiting for permission to stop breathing. Now, the world had placed the same emblem of authority that killed his son right in front of him. Fate had circled back, patient and precise. He looked down at Marcus's photograph once more. "You always believed truth finds its own path," he murmured. "Maybe this is it." He set the picture upright on his desk, its edges framed by the lamp's warm light. Outside, the rain softened into a steady whisper, like the sound of distant applause. For the first time in a long time, Grayson Jared didn't feel powerless. He felt chosen. The hum of the fluorescent lights in the precinct was louder than usual, a restless buzz that crawled under the skin. The morning briefing room, once filled with idle chatter and clinking mugs, was now suffocatingly silent. Every officer's eyes darted toward the door each time it opened, as if the scandal itself might walk in, wearing Corporal Gladwin Linda's face. She arrived 10 minutes late, sunglasses hiding the bruised circles under her eyes, her uniform pressed within an inch of perfection. The air shifted when she entered. Conversations died mid-sentence. The faint click of her boots echoed like defiance. Captain Reese Barrow watched her from his office window, jaw tight. "In here," he said, voice cutting through the murmur. Gladwin hesitated, then squared her shoulders and stepped inside. Barrow gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit." She obeyed but didn't look at him. He closed the blinds. "You know why we're here." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "To crucify me in private before the public does it in full view?" He exhaled through his nose, slow and deliberate. "Linda, for God's sake. You assaulted a man on camera." "He provoked me." Barrow's hand slammed the table. "He stood there. That's all he did. You gave him the fire he needed to burn this department to the ground." She flinched. "You think I don't know that? Then act like it. The commissioner wants a statement by tomorrow morning. An apology video. Something clean, rehearsed, remorseful. We spin this right, and maybe we save your career." "I'm not apologizing to that man," she said, voice rising. "He baited me." Barrow stared at her. "This isn't about your pride, Linda. This is about the badge. You're not protecting it, you're staining it." Her jaw clenched. "He disrespected me." "He exposed you," Barrow corrected sharply. "And if you can't see the difference, maybe you don't belong here." The words hung between them, heavy and final. Gladwin stood slowly. "Then maybe I don't," she said. Her voice trembled, but she didn't back down. "I did what every officer is trained to do, assert control. If that makes me the villain, so be it." Barrow rubbed his temples. "You sound just like Hale." That name stopped her. For a moment, the mask cracked. "Sergeant Hale?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer, just waved her off. "Go home, Corporal. You're on suspension. PR will contact you." She left without another word. But as the door closed behind her, Barrow muttered under his breath, "God help us all." Across the room, a younger officer sat at his desk pretending to type reports, though his eyes were fixed on his phone. The video played again and again, the old man's calm face, the woman's raised hand, the sentence that echoed through the city. "Smile for the camera, Corporal." PC Leon Patel muted the clip, his pulse uneven. The name Grayson Jared wasn't new to him. It had lived quietly in the corners of his memory for years, buried under guilt that wasn't even his own. He opened his locker, pulled out a small black notebook, and flipped to a page dated 8 years earlier, scrawled in another handwriting, now faded. "Hale says the kid tripped, hit the bench. No cameras active. Don't talk about it." It was his brother's handwriting. Arjun Patel. A good man. A quiet one. One of the officers on duty the night Marcus Jared died. Leon had been a teenager then, too young to understand the whispers that filled the house at night. But he remembered the way Arjun drank himself silent after the case closed. He remembered the guilt that sat in his brother's eyes like permanent shadow. 2 years later, Arjun was gone. Car crash on the M25. Officially accidental. Leon had never believed it. Now, staring at the viral clip, the pieces began to shift in his head. The same department. The same mentor. The same man at the center of it all. Sergeant Raymond Hale. He scrolled through internal archives on his screen, fingers trembling slightly. Body cam logs. Complaint records. Training reports. So many files flagged, internal, confidential. One caught his attention. Use of force review, Hale/training oversight, Corporal G. Linda. He opened it. Pages of redacted lines, but one paragraph remained untouched. Subject demonstrated aggressive field behavior consistent with Hale's disciplinary methods. Recommendation: further observation before promotion. Leon leaned back, bile rising in his throat. Hale had protected her. The department had known. And still, they'd let her patrol the streets. He looked around. Colleagues chatting, laughing nervously, the illusion of normalcy. But underneath, he could feel it. The rot. The unspoken rule that loyalty mattered more than truth. That night, after everyone left, Leon stayed behind. The building was quiet, the hum of the vending machine the only sound. He plugged a flash drive into his terminal, heart pounding. File by file, he began copying evidence, archived body cam footage, old complaints, reprimands that never reached HR. When the progress bar hit 100%, he whispered, "Forgive me, Arjun." The next morning, the first set of documents landed in the inbox of an investigative journalist named Ella McNeil, anonymously. The sender name read only, "For Marcus." Meanwhile, across town, Grayson Jarrett sat at his dining table, unaware of the digital storm forming around him. He had spent the night revising his essay, sharpening it not just as science but as philosophy. The physics of power and pressure. He adjusted the final sentence, murmuring it under his breath. In a vacuum, power expands. Only resistance gives it shape. Then he closed the laptop, satisfied. He didn't know who was watching, who was digging, who was preparing to pull the department's secrets into the light. He only knew one thing. The universe had a way of balancing equations, even the human ones. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was pale and new. He poured himself a cup of tea, unaware that miles away, an encrypted folder labeled Hale under 2017 Underster case had just changed hands, the first crack in a shield that had hidden too many sins. The morning broke cold and gray, the kind of London dawn that blurred the edges of everything. Grayson sat at his desk, a faint glow from his laptop washing across the room. The faint tick of the old mantel clock marked the seconds as he stared at the frozen image on his screen. Gladwin's raised hand, his own calm face reflected in her visor. He had replayed the video countless times. But now, he wasn't watching as a victim or a witness. He was watching as a scientist. He opened a blank document and typed a title, "The Physics of Power and Pressure." Then, slowly, deliberately, he began to write. When force meets resistance, energy is transferred. But when force meets calm, the energy is absorbed and reflected. In both physics and power, aggression without direction collapses under its own momentum. He paused, fingers hovering above the keys. The faint hum of the rain outside seemed to echo his thoughts. This wasn't anger anymore. It was analysis. He pulled the viral footage into his editing software. Frame by frame, he charted Gladwin's movement, the arc of her shoulder, the micro-twitch of her jaw, the narrowing of her pupils as she stepped forward. He overlaid motion lines, measured the angles, estimated her speed. 85 newtons of forward force, he murmured. Redirected by zero resistance. He inserted his voiceover, calm, precise, almost clinical. Aggression thrives on reaction. When denied that, it destabilizes itself. The human body, when driven by rage, loses coordination by an average of 40%. That's not just emotion, that's physics. The footage slowed as he described each frame. Her hand rising. His stillness. The ripple of confusion in her stance. "What you're seeing here isn't confrontation," he said softly. "It's entropy. Order giving way to chaos when met with composure." He leaned back, watching the playback. There was no need for music, no dramatics. Just truth, measured in motion and silence. He ended with one final sentence, his voice a low, steady whisper. "Pressure reveals more than it conceals." He rendered the video, eyes reflecting the slow-moving progress bar. The title screen read only, "What Power Looks Like When It's Afraid." Then he uploaded it to a new account under a pseudonym, GJ_reflex theory. When he hit publish, the clock read 2:17 a.m. By morning, the video had taken on a life of its own. Within 3 hours, it hit 1 million views. By noon, 10. The comments section flooded with disbelief and admiration. He turned physics into protest. Calm as a weapon. Genius. This isn't a reaction, it's a masterclass. Scholars shared it. Journalists quoted it. Even universities posted excerpts under ethics discussions. For the first time, the narrative shifted. Grayson Jared wasn't the frail victim in a viral clip. He was the man who had just dismantled an entire institution's logic using its own language of reason. In the precinct, Captain Barrow stared at his computer in silence. The video played again and again, his reflection ghosting across the screen. Gladwin stood beside him, pale, trembling with quiet fury. "He's mocking me," she said. "He's educating the world," Barrow replied quietly. She folded her arms. "It's doctored. He's twisting it." He turned to her slowly. "No, he's exposing it. And there's a difference." She looked away, jaw clenched. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "I'm surviving it," he said. "You should start doing the same." He clicked to a news site. The headline read, "The Physics of Power and Pressure. A Scholar's Breakdown of Police Aggression Goes Global." Subheading, "Anonymous author uses real science to reveal hidden truths behind authority and control." But Barrow knew anonymity wouldn't last. Someone would connect the dots soon enough. He looked at Gladwin. "They're calling for your permanent suspension. The commissioner's running out of excuses." She turned sharply toward the door, eyes burning. "I did my job." Barrow's voice dropped to a whisper. "Your job was to uphold the law, not prove his point." Across the city, Grayson sat in the same cafe on Westbourne Grove, sipping tea as the world burned with conversation. The TV behind the counter showed a panel debate, journalists, professors, and retired officers discussing his video. "What's fascinating here," one commentator said, "is the way he's reframed the narrative. It's not about guilt or innocence, it's about control and collapse. He's turned calmness into rebellion." Aisha, the cafe owner, brought his refill and smiled. "They're all talking about you again, Dr. Jared." He smiled faintly. "Not about me. About truth." "Maybe," she said. But truth needed a voice. He didn't respond, just looked out at the rain. Somewhere between grief and quiet satisfaction, he felt something he hadn't in years: purpose. That night, the commissioner called an emergency meeting. The boardroom was filled with tension and the soft clatter of nervous pens. "Public opinion's turned," one official said. "Every outlet's quoting that line. Pressure reveals more than it conceals. They're dissecting it like scripture." "Whoever made that video," another muttered, "just handed us a PR nightmare." Barrow sat silently as they argued, until the commissioner looked at him. "What's your recommendation?" He hesitated before speaking. "Suspend Corporal Linda indefinitely. Conduct a formal review of her conduct and her previous cases." Gladwin's name hung in the air like smoke. No one defended her. The motion passed unanimously. When the news broke, the city exhaled. Officer suspended indefinitely after viral analysis of police conduct. The caption beneath showed two stills, one of Gladwin, eyes downcast. The other, Grayson's face mid-sentence from the video, calm, resolute, timeless. In the comments, people quoted his words. Teachers wrote lesson plans around them. Protesters printed them on placards. Pressure reveals more than it conceals. It was no longer just a line. It was a truth reborn. That evening, Grayson turned off the TV and sat quietly by the window. His tea had gone cold again. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass, blurred by rain. He wasn't celebrating. He wasn't gloating. He was thinking of Marcus, of how his son had believed logic could outlast lies. He whispered to the night, "You were right, my boy. There's power in proof." For the first time in years, he allowed himself to smile. Not in triumph, but in understanding. Truth had found its way through equations, and the world was finally paying attention. Rain lashed at the glass like 1,000 restless hands, tapping against the panes of the Metropolitan Police Building as the storm inside began to break. In the early hours of the morning, the first leak dropped online. An encrypted archive sent to 3 major media outlets. The headline appeared before sunrise. Leaked files reveal officer misconduct shielded by Sergeant Raymond Hale. Inside were complaint reports, body cam stills, and disciplinary forms stamped, "Closed, internal resolution." Every single one bore the same approving signature. R. Hale. The city woke to the sound of alarms, not from sirens, but from phones. By mid-morning, journalists crowded the precinct gates. Cameras flashed like gunfire, reporters shouted questions, and the name Gladwin Linda was suddenly everywhere again. In a cramped back office, Captain Barrows slammed his palm on the desk. Who the hell leaked these? No one answered. Officers exchanged nervous glances. The room smelled of coffee, rain, and panic. On the screen before them, the evidence was undeniable. Old complaints, citizen statements, and redacted pages from internal inquiries long thought buried. One file in particular made Barrows' throat tighten. 2017. Custody death. Subject: Marcus Jared. He clicked it open. The page was incomplete. Missing timestamps, erased witness names, but the signatures remained. Hale's, scrawled in blue ink. Gladwin's, neatly printed beneath, Trainee Observation Officer. Barrows stared at it for a long moment. He joined the force the year after that case closed, heard whispers of the scandal, but never saw the documents himself. Now the whole country could. In the press conference room downstairs, the commissioner faced a wall of microphones. "We are aware of the unauthorized release of sensitive internal documents," he said tightly. "An investigation is underway." "Commissioner," a journalist interrupted, "these files show Sergeant Hale dismissed over a dozen misconduct reports involving Officer Linda. Did you know about this pattern?" "No comment." Another voice shouted, "And what about the connection to the Marcus Jared case? Why were all recordings deleted?" The commissioner's mask cracked. "That case was closed years ago." "But wrongly," the journalist pressed. "And under your watch." Flashes erupted. The room fell into chaos. Miles away, Grayson Jared sat in his study, watching the coverage unfold. The news anchors spoke his son's name with sudden reverence, the same name they had ignored for nearly a decade. He leaned back in his chair, emotionless, though his pulse hammered in his ears. Every lie they had built was finally collapsing. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Message only. Meet me at St. Edmund's car park. Midnight. Bring no one. He stared at the words for a long time. No signature. No clue. Just the quiet certainty that the message was not random. The car park was almost deserted by midnight. A single flickering streetlight painted the asphalt in dull amber. Grayson's footsteps echoed as he crossed the puddled lot, his coat pulled tight against the wind. A figure stepped from the shadows, young, nervous, uniform half hidden beneath a hoodie. "Dr. Jared," the voice called softly. "Yes." The man stepped closer, face pale under the light. "I'm Leon. PC Leon Patel." Grayson studied him, barely 30, eyes ringed with exhaustion, a tension that came from carrying secrets too heavy for his age. Leon swallowed hard. "I sent the files." Grayson didn't move. "Why?" "Because my brother was there," Leon said quietly. "The night your son died." The words hung between them, cutting through the rain. Leon's voice shook. "Arjun Patel. He worked under Sergeant Hale. He told me what happened before the crash." Grayson's eyes narrowed. "Crash." Leon nodded. 2 years after Marcus died. They said it was an accident. It wasn't. He was about to come forward. The silence was suffocating. The tribunal chamber was built to inspire awe: tall ceilings, polished oak tables, and a row of officials seated like judges at the edge of the world. Cameras lined the back wall, the red recording lights glowing like 1,000 quiet eyes. Outside, the air buzzed with tension. Protesters filled the streets, chanting names. Marcus Jared's among them, their voices rising through the windows in rhythmic defiance. Inside, the silence was sharp enough to cut. Corporal Gladwin Linda sat at the defense table, her uniform pressed but her shoulders rigid. The once fierce confidence in her eyes had faded to something brittle. Her lawyer leaned close, whispering strategy. She nodded mechanically, her gaze fixed ahead, not at the crowd, not at the press, but at the door through which her reckoning would soon walk. At the far end, the chairwoman of the tribunal cleared her throat. "This inquiry is now in session," she said, voice steady. "We will examine the conduct of Corporal Linda during the Westbourne Grove incident and the subsequent revelations concerning her record." The room murmured, journalists scribbling, cameras whirring softly. "Corporal Linda," the chairwoman continued, "you understand that this is a public inquiry. Everything said here is on record." Gladwin's lawyer stood. "My client maintains that her actions were by the book. She believed she was engaging with a suspect fitting the description of an active burglar. The subject was uncooperative and verbally aggressive." A ripple of discontent spread through the gallery. The lawyer raised a hand. "Furthermore, the viral footage is accurate," the chairwoman interjected coolly. "We've confirmed its authenticity." "Continue." The lawyer hesitated, then sat. Gladwin's eyes flickered, searching the crowd. And then she saw him. Grayson Jared. Calm, composed, dressed in a dark suit, walking toward the witness stand with the stillness of someone who carried both truth and loss in equal measure. The air shifted as he took his seat. "Dr. Jared," the chairwoman said, "thank you for appearing. We understand this must be difficult." He inclined his head. "Not as difficult as burying a son." A hush fell. Even the cameras seemed to stop humming. The lawyer cleared his throat nervously. "Dr. Jared, let's focus on the incident, shall we? You admit you refused to comply with lawful orders that day." Grayson's eyes met his, unflinching. "I complied with decency. I refused to kneel for ignorance." The gallery erupted in a low wave of murmurs. The lawyer reddened. "Sir, this isn't a philosophical debate." "It is," Grayson interrupted softly. "Because when power becomes blind, philosophy is the last thing that can still see." The chairwoman raised a hand to quiet the room. "Dr. Jared, could you please recount the events of that morning in your own words?" He nodded. "It was just after 8. I was on my way to the corner shop. The officer shouted for me to stop. I did. I identified myself. She didn't listen. She called me a suspect, raised her voice, then her hand. I didn't react. The cameras did the rest." He paused, his tone even but resonant. "The difference between what she saw and what was there was the color of my skin." Gladwin shifted in her seat. Her jaw tightened, but her eyes refused to rise. The lawyer quickly interjected. "You're implying racism, but Corporal Linda had legitimate cause." Grayson's voice cut through like ice. "Legitimate cause doesn't begin with the words, 'You people never learn.'" Gasps rippled across the room. The chairwoman leaned forward. "That line isn't in the viral video, Dr. Jared." "No," he said, eyes glinting. "Because the public never heard her body cam audio." Gladwin's head snapped up. "What?" Her lawyer turned sharply. "Body cam, there was no recovered footage." Grayson reached into his briefcase and produced a small drive. "Recovered, yes. Released, not yet." He placed it gently on the evidence table. courtesy of a man whose brother died for telling the truth. The chairwoman gestured to the technician beside her. Play it. The room went dark except for the screen. Static filled the speakers, then a voice, unmistakably Gladwin's, crackled through. Control, I've got another one of them refusing directions. The silence that followed was total. Then came the faint sound of boots on pavement, her breathing heavy, and the moment she yelled, "Stop!" before the shove. The video cut out. When the lights rose, the tribunal chamber had changed. The air felt heavier, like gravity itself had grown tired. Gladwin sat frozen. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The color drained from her face until she looked like a ghost of herself. Her lawyer leaned forward, whispering furiously, but she didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the screen, as if trying to undo what the world had just witnessed. The chairwoman spoke at last, her tone cold as iron. Corporal Gladwin Linda, this footage, alongside corroborating evidence, confirms a pattern of misconduct and prejudice unbecoming of your office. You are hereby dismissed from the Metropolitan Police Service pending criminal investigation. The final words echoed like a verdict from somewhere older than law itself. The press erupted, flashes bursting, voices overlapping, journalists shouting questions. Gladwin stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. You don't understand. I was following orders, Hale said. The lawyer grabbed her arm. Stop talking. But the damage was done. Her voice, desperate and raw, cut through the chaos, a final confession she hadn't meant to give. Hale's name now hung in the air for all to hear. Grayson rose quietly. Reporters tried to surround him, but he waved them off. Dr. Jared, what does this mean for the investigation? Will you press charges? Do you forgive her? He paused at the doorway, the storm of voices behind him fading into a dull roar. He looked back once, at the tribunal, at the shattered woman who had once screamed in his face, at the crowd still hungry for answers. Forgiveness, he said softly, isn't the same as forgetting. Then he stepped out into the afternoon light, the hum of the crowd rising outside the building. Somewhere in the chaos, a voice shouted his name. Another began chanting Marcus's. And then, as if the whole city understood the weight of the moment, the chant grew louder, echoing off the walls of London. Justice for Marcus! Justice for Marcus! For the first time in 8 years, it didn't sound like a plea. It sounded like a promise. The night air was cool and still, carrying the low hum of thousands gathered on Westbourne Grove. Candles lined the pavement like stars fallen to earth. Soft, flickering lights illuminating faces from every corner of the city. They came with signs, flowers, photographs, and silence. Above them, the same street lamps that once burned over confrontation now glowed over remembrance. The world had seen the rage. Tonight was for release. At the center of it all stood Grayson Jared. The old man in the maroon coat looked smaller against the sea of light, but there was a quiet authority about him, the kind that didn't need to raise its voice to be heard. Behind him, a banner fluttered gently. Justice for Marcus. Truth never dies. The crowd waited. Reporters stood back for once, their cameras lowered, their pens still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Grayson took the microphone with steady hands. He didn't speak immediately. He looked around, at the faces, the candles, the glow of phone flashlights swaying gently like a tide of hope, and then he began. 8 years ago, he said softly, this street meant nothing to me. It was just another corner of a city that had taken more than it gave. His voice was calm, but every syllable carried weight. Then one morning, I walked here for my tea and my newspaper. And fate, or maybe truth, decided to meet me halfway. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few heads bowed. You've all seen the video, he continued. You've seen what power looks like when it's afraid. You've seen what calm can do when it refuses to kneel. But what you haven't seen is what came before. He glanced down, gathering himself. The memory was still sharp, but no longer unbearable. I lost my son, Marcus Jared, to hands that were meant to protect him. I lost my wife to grief that never healed. And I lost my faith, not in God, but in fairness. The crowd was silent now, every breath synchronized. When I met that officer on this very street, he said, I saw something in her eyes, the same blindness that killed my boy. But I also saw something else. Fear. And in that fear, I realized something I had forgotten. I still had power. The power to stand. He paused, and a soft drizzle began to fall, almost poetic, as if London itself was listening. Grayson looked up toward the darkened sky and smiled faintly. I didn't plan to fight her. I planned to be still. And sometimes, stillness is the loudest form of defiance there is. A murmur of agreement rose and fell among the listeners. He placed his hand on the podium. They've asked me if I forgive her. They want a neat ending, a perfect headline. He let out a slow breath. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's remembering without surrender. That line lingered, floating in the air like music. Phones rose instinctively, recording the moment. I forgive her, he said, his tone neither soft nor harsh. Not for her sake. For mine. Because if I don't, then Marcus never rests, and I never heal. The drizzle thickened into gentle rain, and no one moved. Some bowed their heads. Some wiped their eyes. The candles hissed softly but refused to go out. Across the crowd, someone began to hum, low at first, then joined by another, until the sound became a slow, mournful tune. It wasn't planned, but it felt inevitable. Grayson listened for a moment before continuing. We talk about justice as if it's an end. But justice, he said, isn't a destination. It's a direction, one we must keep walking even when the road disappears beneath us. A young boy in the front row lifted a candle higher. Grayson caught his gaze and smiled faintly. I look at you all, and I see my son in your faces. I see every parent who ever had to teach their child how to survive what they should never have to fear. And I promise you, this fight isn't mine anymore. It's yours now. Take it somewhere better. The crowd broke into gentle applause, the kind that sounded more like prayer than praise. In the days that followed, every major outlet carried the image. Grayson Jared, standing in the rain, surrounded by candlelight. The headline read, The Power of Stillness, a Father's Forgiveness in the Face of Injustice. Social media buzzed, not with outrage this time, but reflection. He didn't shout. He didn't retaliate. He simply stood. Forgiveness as protest, that's a new kind of power. The street that broke him became the place he rebuilt. Talk shows replayed his speech. Universities dissected his words in ethics lectures. Churches quoted him in sermons. And Gladwin, watching from a small apartment she hadn't left in weeks, sat in front of her TV with tears streaking her face. When Grayson's voice echoed, Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's remembering without surrender, she pressed her hands together and whispered, Thank you. The next morning, Westbourne Grove still smelled of candle wax and rain. The street was clean, but traces of the vigil remained. Melted wax on the pavement, a wilted flower taped to a lamppost, a note that simply read, For Marcus, gone, not forgotten. Grayson returned quietly, coat collar up, tea in hand. He paused at the corner where it all began, the exact spot where he once faced Gladwin Linda. Now it was just another street. But to him, it had become sacred ground. He bent down, placed a single white rose on the spot, and whispered, Peace, my boy. As he stood, he noticed a few people recognizing him from afar. They didn't rush him or ask for photos. They simply nodded, a silent salute to dignity. He returned it with a faint smile. That evening, the sunset broke through the clouds for the first time in days, casting a warm gold across the city. Grayson sat by his window, the light reflecting off the framed photo of Marcus and Lillian. For the first time, their smiles didn't hurt to look at. He reached for his tea, feeling the calm that had eluded him for years. The storm, at last, had passed. Not because the world was fixed, but because his heart finally was. Outside, someone walked by humming the same song from the vigil. Grayson listened, closed his eyes, and let it carry him somewhere peaceful, to memory, to forgiveness, to something almost divine. By late afternoon, the sun broke through, painting the streets of Westbourne Grove in amber and gold. Grayson walked slowly down the familiar pavement, cane tapping rhythmically against the stone. The shopkeepers greeted him with quiet nods, some out of respect, others simply in recognition. He reached the same corner where it had all begun, the spot where humiliation turned into history. Now, the street was peaceful again. A small plaque glimmered on the wall nearby. In memory of Marcus Jared, his stillness changed the streets. Someone, he didn't know who, had added it after the vigil. Every time he passed, new flowers appeared beneath it. He knelt carefully and laid a single white bloom among them. His voice, low but firm, carried into the open air. "It's done, son," he said. "We made it." The wind rustled gently through the leaves, as if answering. For the first time, there was no ache behind his words, only release. He stood slowly, dusted his hands, and turned to leave. A boy, maybe 10 years old, stood nearby, holding his mother's hand. His eyes were wide with a kind of innocent awe that only children possess. "Mum," the boy whispered, tugging her sleeve. "That's him." Grayson smiled faintly, pretending not to notice. But the boy stepped closer, shy yet determined. "You're the man who stood up to the police, right?" he asked. Grayson paused, studying the child's earnest face, all curiosity and courage. He saw a little of Marcus in him. "No," Grayson said softly, with that same calm that had once stilled a storm. "I just stood still when they wanted me to bow." The boy tilted his head, as if thinking it over. Then he smiled, a simple, pure smile, and ran back to his mother. Grayson watched them go, his heart lighter than it had been in years. As he continued down the street, the city seemed quieter, gentler, or perhaps he was. The shop signs gleamed in the evening light. A busker strummed softly on a corner, his melody weaving through the air like a farewell song. Grayson stopped once more, turning his gaze to the horizon. The sun was setting, but behind the rooftops, a faint light of dawn-colored sky lingered, the promise of renewal. For years, he had thought justice was a battle. Now he knew it was something else entirely, a slow, patient tide that always found its way home. He adjusted his scarf, took one last look at the street, and began walking toward the glow of the city, into the quiet victory that no one could take from him. As he disappeared into the distance, the reflection of his figure shimmered against the wet pavement, an old man, dignified and unbroken, framed against the first blush of twilight. And in the soft hum of the city, if one listened closely, it almost sounded like Marcus's laughter carried in the wind. Subscribe if you believe one voice can change everything.